Japan, a chain of islands rising from the Pacific, where ancient traditions meet futuristic skylines, a land of samurai and shoguns, of emperors and warriors, of temples that whisper prayers 1,000 years old. But behind this beauty lies a history shaped by war, by fire, by rebirth. How did a nation once isolated from the world become one of its greatest powers? This is not just the story of Japan. It is the story of survival against impossible odds. Welcome to the entire history of Japan. Japan's history begins not with kings and kingdoms, but with legends. Ancient Japanese texts tell of the gods Izanagi and Izanami, who stirred the ocean with a jeweled spear and created the islands of Japan. The people believed their emperors descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu herself, giving the throne a divine, unbroken line unlike anywhere else in the world. Around 10,000 BCE, long before written history, the Jomon people thrived on these islands. They were hunter-gatherers, skilled in pottery and fishing, living in small villages surrounded by forests and seas. But by 300 BCE, a new wave arrived. The Yayoi people, bringing rice farming, iron tools, and social hierarchies. This marked the beginning of Japan's transformation from scattered tribes into an emerging civilization. By the 3rd century CE, power was consolidating. The Yamato clan rose to dominance, claiming divine ancestry and laying the foundation of the imperial line that still exists today. Buddhism arrived from Korea and China in the 6th century, forever changing Japan's spiritual and cultural landscape. Temples rose alongside shrines, and with them came Confucian ideas of order and loyalty, reshaping society. Japan absorbed heavily from China during this era, its writing system, architecture, and political structures. The Nara period, 710–794, established the first permanent capital, and the Heian period, 794–985, brought an age of courtly elegance. Aristocrats in Kyoto wrote poetry, painted, and followed refined rituals, giving us classics like The Tale of Genji, the world's first novel. Yet outside the capital's palaces, power struggles brewed. By the late 1100s, Japan shifted into an age of warriors. The Genpei War, 1180–1185, saw the Minamoto and Taira clans clash in a brutal civil war. When the Minamoto emerged victorious, they established the Kamakura shogunate, a military government where the emperor remained a symbolic figure, but real power rested in the hands of the shogun. This was the birth of samurai rule. The samurai class, bound by honor and loyalty, dominated the medieval period. They defended Japan from Mongol invasions in 1274 and 1281, when massive typhoons, later called kamikaze or divine winds, wrecked Kublai Khan's fleets, saving the islands. To the Japanese, it was proof of divine protection. But samurai power also led to chaos. By the 14th and 15th centuries, Japan descended into civil wars. Rival clans and warlords, called daimyo, fought endlessly for land and influence. The emperor was powerless, the shogun weak, and the land fractured. This era became known as the Sengoku, or Warring States period. Villages burned, castles rose, and alliances shifted overnight. It was a time when loyalty could be bought, and betrayal often came with the swing of a sword. Yet from this chaos, 3 great unifiers would soon rise: Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu, men who would finally bring order to Japan. Out of the fires of the Warring States period, one man finally brought order: Tokugawa Ieyasu. After defeating rival warlords at the decisive Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, he established the Tokugawa shogunate. From his new capital in Edo, modern-day Tokyo, Ieyasu and his descendants would rule Japan for more than 250 years. The Tokugawa era was unlike any before it. After centuries of bloodshed, Japan entered a period of relative peace and stability. Samurai still held prestige, But with no wars to fight, they became administrators, scholars, and loyal retainers of their daimyo. Society was strictly organized. At the top were the samurai, followed by farmers, artisans, and merchants. This rigid hierarchy was meant to keep order, but it also sowed tension, especially as merchants grew wealthy while samurai often fell into debt. One of the defining features of Tokugawa Japan was isolation. In the 1630s, the shogunate, fearing the influence of European colonial powers and Christianity, implemented the sakoku policy, literally closed country. Foreign missionaries were expelled, Japanese were forbidden from traveling abroad, and trade was severely restricted. Only a handful of Dutch and Chinese traders were allowed to operate under strict supervision at the port of Nagasaki. For over 2 centuries, Japan stood apart from the world. Yet isolation did not mean stagnation. Within its borders, Japanese culture flourished. Edo became one of the largest cities on earth, buzzing with theaters, markets, and entertainment districts. The ukiyo, or floating world, gave rise to kabuki theater, woodblock prints, and haiku poetry. Samurai might have lived by the code of Bushido, but townspeople shaped Japan's vibrant popular culture. Education spread widely, literacy rates rose, and local schools taught not only Confucian values but also practical skills. Agricultural advances improved food supply, and regional markets thrived. It was a time of quiet prosperity. Yet beneath the surface, pressure was building. By the 18th and 19th centuries, cracks in isolation appeared. Smugglers and foreign ships occasionally tested Japan's closed borders. The outside world was changing rapidly. Europe industrialized, and the United States expanded its naval power across the Pacific. In 1853, a moment arrived that shattered Japan's centuries of isolation. Commodore Matthew Perry of the U.S. Navy sailed into Edo Bay with black-hulled warships and a demand: Japan must open to trade. The shogunate had little choice. With its outdated defenses, Japan could not resist modern firepower. In 1854, the Treaty of Kanagawa was signed, opening Japanese ports to American ships. Soon after, Britain, Russia, and other powers demanded similar agreements. These unequal treaties humiliated Japan, granting foreigners special rights and exposing the shogunate's weakness. As foreign influence grew, so did unrest at home. Many samurai and peasants began to question the Tokugawa rule, blaming them for bowing to outsiders. Secret societies formed, some calling for the expulsion of foreigners, others for the restoration of imperial power. The slogan, "Revere the Emperor, expel the barbarians," swept through Japan. By the 1860s, Japan was once again on the brink of civil war. Rebels and loyalists clashed, foreign powers interfered, and the authority of the shogunate collapsed. In 1868, the Tokugawa shogunate fell, and power was formally returned to the emperor. This moment became known as the Meiji Restoration, a turning point that would propel Japan into a new era. When the Tokugawa shogunate collapsed in 1868, the emperor, long a symbolic figure, returned to power. The young ruler, Emperor Meiji, became the face of a new era, the Meiji Restoration. But restoring the emperor was not about going back to old traditions. Instead, it was about transforming Japan into a modern state that could stand equal to the great powers of the world. The leaders of the new government sent missions abroad, studying Western science, law, military tactics, and industry. They brought back railroads, telegraphs, factories, and a new system of education. The old feudal domains were abolished, and Japan was centralized under a strong imperial state. Samurai lost their privileges, but many became officers, bureaucrats, or entrepreneurs. Japan modernized with astonishing speed. Within a generation, it built warships, steel mills, and universities. Its new constitution of 1889 created a parliament, though real power remained with the emperor and his advisors. But more than anything, the Meiji leaders believed that survival depended on strength. Rich country, strong army became the national motto. Japan's modern army soon proved its power. In 1894–95, it fought the First Sino-Japanese War, defeating China and gaining Taiwan. Just a decade later, Japan stunned the world by defeating the mighty Russian Empire in the Russo-Japanese War, 1904–05. It was the first time an Asian power had triumphed over a European empire in modern war, and it announced Japan's arrival on the world stage. As the early 20th century progressed, Japan expanded further, annexing Korea in 1910 and joining World War I on the side of the Allies. The victory gave it new territories in the Pacific, but prosperity was uneven, and political turmoil simmered beneath the surface. By the 1930s, as the Great Depression shook the world, militarists and nationalists seized influence in Japan. They dreamed of building a vast empire in Asia. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria. In 1937, full-scale war erupted with China, bringing horrific atrocities like the Nanjing Massacre. As Europe descended into World War II, Japan struck a deal with Germany and Italy, forming the Axis powers. The defining moment came on December 7, 1941, the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. Japanese planes crippled the U.S. Pacific Fleet, dragging America into World War II. For a time, Japan's empire stretched from Burma to the Pacific Islands. But the tide turned. Battles like Midway and Guadalcanal showed that the U.S. would not be defeated easily. By 1945, Japan was losing ground rapidly. Cities were firebombed, the economy collapsed, and yet its leaders refused to surrender. Then came the unthinkable. In August 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing over 100,000 people instantly and devastating the cities. Soon after, Japan surrendered unconditionally. The once mighty empire lay in ruins. The post-war years brought a dramatic rebirth. Under U.S. occupation led by General Douglas MacArthur, Japan adopted a new constitution in 1947, renouncing war, granting democratic rights, and placing sovereignty with the people. The emperor was reduced to a symbolic role. Instead of military conquest, Japan turned to economic growth. In the 1950s–70s, it experienced the Japanese economic miracle. Cars, electronics, and technology made Japan one of the world's leading economies. Tokyo became a global metropolis, and Japan hosted the 1964 Olympics, showcasing its recovery. Yet challenges persisted. Crowded cities, political scandals, and natural disasters like the 2011 tsunami and Fukushima nuclear crisis. Still, Japan remained resilient, blending tradition with innovation. Anime, manga, cuisine, and culture spread worldwide, giving Japan immense soft power. Today, Japan is a nation of paradoxes. Ancient temples stand beside neon skyscrapers. Shinto rituals coexist with cutting-edge robotics. It is a country shaped by centuries of war, peace, isolation, and transformation. From the Age of the Samurai to the nuclear age, from shoguns to technology, Japan's history is the story of survival, reinvention, and endurance. And through it all, one lesson stands clear. Japan may bend under pressure, but it never breaks.